Hi, John.
I was beginning to I sent you an
Uh,
email.
I know. I just saw it come up where I
Oh,
logged
yeah.
in.
I thought I hit a black hole.
No, you never know. That's why I never trust computers. You never know what's going to come up.
Yeah. Well, you and I've been in a black hole, I think, a couple of times.
Yeah, yeah,
I see Rachel's
and-
here.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I'm only going to be able to attend about 20 minutes because I've got a meeting I've got to be to at 5.
Okay, well, we'll all talk fast.
Chris is working, so it might be a small group today.
Okay. Well, we'll wait and give everybody else another minute before
Sure.
we
Fred,
start.
you look like it must be winter. You got a sweatshirt on.
No, not really. It's like around the upper 50s here. It's a
Oh,
really mild.
really?
It's a typical
Okay.
mild Greenville winter. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is supposed to be a mild winter, and I hope that is the case.
So far, yeah, it looks good. Okay. Um, well, I guess we might as well go ahead and start. To what we're up to now, the parsha we're going to read this coming weekend um, is starting the story of Joseph. So we're starting with chapter 37, and the story really begins with the first 11 verses, 1 through 11. If someone wants to read that.
Sure. And Jacob dwelled in the land of his father's sojournings in the land of Canaan. This is the lineage of Jacob. Joseph, 17 years old, was tending the flock with his brothers, assisting the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, the wives of his father. And Joseph brought ill report of them to their father. And Israel loved Joseph more than all his sons, for he was the child of his old age. And he made him an ornamented tunic. And his brothers saw it was he their father loved more than all his brothers, and they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. And Joseph dreamed a dream and told it to his brothers, and they hated him all the more. And he said to them, Listen, pray to this dream that I dreamed. And look, we were binding sheaves in the field, and look, my sheaf arose and actually stood up. And look, your sheaves drew round and bowed to my sheaf. And his brothers said to him, Do you mean to reign over us? Do you mean to rule us? And they hated him all the more for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed yet another dream and recounted it to his brothers. And he said, Look, I dreamed a dream again. And look, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing to me. And he recounted it to his father and to his brothers. And his father rebuked him and said, What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall we really come, I and your mother and your brothers, to bow before you to the ground? And his brothers were jealous of him, while his father kept the thing in mind.
So here you get Joseph, who obviously is really a brat. We don't know why, he brings bad reports about his brothers. But, obviously Jacob is very upfront about the fact that Joseph is his favorite son. He said he loved Joseph more than his other children. It says because he's the son of his old age, but actually, he has two sons of his old age. I mean, Benjamin also. And the rabbinic commentary is that even though Joseph is 17 now, and Benjamin's still a baby, and so basically all the attention, is going to focus on Joseph. Um, the coat is kind of interesting because there's about a dozen different translations of that, what the coat was. The Hebrew is ketonet pasim, and ketonet is a common biblical Hebrew word. It just means a tunic or a coat or jacket. But the word pasim only occurs that one time in the entire Bible. It's not known to occur anywhere else. And so it's just a sheer guess as to what kind of coat it was. Um, I think the most popular translation is called a coat of many colors.
Right.
But it's also been called an embroidered coat. It's been called a long sleeve coat. It's been called a decorated coat. It's nobody has any idea what that word posse means. So, you can really call it anything. Um, the dreams are significant because in the biblical world, dreams are always significant. They always predict the future, and so the dreams really are serious. The second dream with the moon and with the sun and moon and 11 stars bowing down to him is a little bit odd because his mother is dead. His mother Rachel is not there anymore. So that's kind of odd that he puts it that way. But the last line there is that the father kept the saying in mind, and the literal Hebrew there is he guarded it. And the interpretation that Rashi and some of the other rabbinic commentators have is that Jacob really understands the significance of the dream. That Joseph probably is going to rule in some capacity in the future, and so he keeps it in the back of his mind. He doesn't brush it off as just a kid, making something up. In his world, dreams always mean something, and so Jacob really, does think that this is going to come true someday. Um, then where it picks up again really is not till verse 18.
What
And
chapter and book or what book and chapter are we on, Fred? I'm
well, Genesis 37.
37. Okay.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And so the story picks up again really with verse 18
I
in
have a
chapter
quick
37.
I have
Yeah.
a quick question. I guess so could Achim can that be for boys and girls? Like could it be 11 including Dina?
Uh, well, no, it
Or
assumes,
no?
probably not.
Okay.
It's assumed that the 11 stars are his 11 brothers. And that's a good question though, because there must have been sisters there too. The only one that we know about is Dina, who's Leah's brother. But as a lot of commentators have noticed, what are the odds of one guy having 12 sons and one daughter? I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
that's astronomical odds. Jacob must have had other daughters, but they're just not mentioned. Girls are just not mentioned in the Bible. And Dinah's only mentioned because she's just there to get raped, so Shimon and Levi can massacre the people of Shechem. But it's there and fact the rabbis of the Talmud said that Jacob had many daughters also, but nobody except Dinah gets to have their name listed.
Is Joseph the oldest one?
Well, he's the next to youngest. He's
That's what I
special
thought.
because
Okay.
yeah, he's special because he's Rachel's first child. And Jacob has always considered Rachel to be his real wife. I mean, he never wanted to marry Leah in the first place.
Oh,
That
okay.
was a deception. He's always really considered Leah to be his to I mean Rachel to be his real wife, and so in a sense, Joseph is special because it's really his firstborn, really by the woman he intended to marry in the first place. So in one sense, Joseph is his real firstborn son, not Reuben.
Oh,
And this
okay.
is probably why he lavishes all this attention on him.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
actually, you see it later on also. You know, uh, Joseph later has two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And as we'll read later, right toward the end of the book of Genesis, when Jacob has already come down to Egypt with his family during the famine, and Jacob is dying and doing his last things, he asked Joseph to bring his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and he actually adopts them as his own sons, even though they're his grandsons. He adopts them as if they were his sons. So instead of having a tribe of Joseph, you have two tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. And Manasseh is the oldest, and Ephraim is the young one. And so his sight is failing, just like his father Isaac, in his last days. He has a hard time telling one from the other. But he asked Joseph to bring them close so he can put his hands on their heads and give them a blessing. and the older son supposedly gets the right hand blessing, and that should be Manasseh. He's the older boy, and so Joseph puts Manasseh at Jacob's right hand and Ephraim at his left, and then Ephraim crosses his hands uh, and gives it so that Ephraim would get the blessing of the older child. And and Joseph says, "Wait a minute, Dad, you're making a mistake. Manasseh should get your right hand." And Jacob says, "No, I know what I'm doing. Ephraim is special." And that actually became important later, because later in the rule of King Solomon, when Solomon dies, the 10 northern tribes rebel against the house of David, and the country literally falls apart. And the leader of the rebellion is Jeroboam, who's one of the tribal leaders of the tribe of Ephraim. It's
Mm.
Ephraim that leads the revolt against the house of David. And I think Ephraim really could make a pretty good case that they should be the governing tribe in Israel.
Hmm. Didn't you send us that whole tree of uh, when we were studying that maybe a year or so ago,
Yeah,
the
when we're
whole
doing the
family
history thing,
tree?
yeah,
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 I thought you did. I got to look that up.
yeah,
I'll go ahead and read next. What 18 to what, Fred?
yeah. The next section really is 18 through 36.
18 to 36.
Uh-huh,
Okay.
the long one.
They saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood, throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father." So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty, there was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels bearing gum balm and myrrh on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers listened to him. Then Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. They took Joseph to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, he tore his clothes and returned to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone, and where shall I go?" Then they took Joseph's robe and slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in the blood. And they sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, "This we have found. Please identify whether it is your son's robe or not." And he identified it and said, "It is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him, Joseph. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his garments and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, "No, I shall go down to Sheol to my son's mourning. Thus his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of the Pharaoh, the captain of the guard.
One of the things, that you really notice about this story, this looks like it's one of the places in the Bible where they really tried to put two different stories together. If you look at the details again, and he sold to the Ishmaelites, but then he sold to the Midianites.
Yeah,
And here
it
you
sounds
have
like he was resold.
sold and resold. Yeah, yeah, there are obviously two different stories here. In one version, Reuben's trying to save him, but then in the other, it's Judah who saves him.
Mm-hmm.
There's one theory about it that this may reflect a later political argument, maybe years later, after the exodus from Egypt, a quarrel between the tribes of Reuben and the tribe of Judah over who should be, the ruling tribe. And so this story may represent two different versions, of that. Yeah, but it doesn't really hold together as a single story. The other thing that's interesting is that when Reuben sees we return to the pit, and you have to wonder, where did Reuben return from? I mean, they're all out there in the field.
Yeah.
I mean, where did Reuben go? But now he's returning. The thing
He
it
didn't go
just
down to the corner 7-Eleven.
exactly. And it doesn't hold together as a single story. It kind of
Yeah.
looks like two stories kind of pasted together. But the interesting thing is, though, that in verse 29, it says, when Reuben returned to the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, he rent his clothes. And this is really the first mention I think we have in the Bible of tearing your clothes as a sign of mourning or as a sign of receiving
Mm.
bad news. It's a custom the rabbis picked up, and it's still done at Jewish funerals to the present day. Um, Among the Orthodox, you actually do tear an article of clothing, usually the lapel of a coat, or you'll tear away the pocket of a shirt. For conservative and Reformed Jews, most funerals, it's just done symbolically. You have a little black ribbon that you pin on your coat and you cut a piece of the ribbon. But for the Orthodox, they actually literally do rend their clothes. And this is really the first mention we have of it in the Bible with that. Um, and then Jacob does the same thing. When he hears the news, he tears his clothes. Um, and then he mentions he's going to go down to Sheol in mourning. And here again, this is the first time that Sheol is mentioned in the Bible. And nobody really knows what Sheol was. Um, it's not, a lot of commentators feel there's just a poetic name for the grave. And in some translations, we'll just translate Sheol as the grave. That Jacob is saying, and I will go down to the grave in mourning. Uh, there is a minority opinion, though, that Sheol was really somewhere under the earth, kind of like the Greek Hades, where the dead went. It's usually thought that the in the Hebrew Bible there really is no concept of an afterlife. That's something that came into Judaism later, probably during the Greco-Roman period. But there are people that argue the other way, that this Sheol was some kind of place that the dead did go down to, some kind of afterlife. Although, the majority opinion is it's just another word for the grave. Because nobody talks about a final judgment or reward or punishment in Sheol. And it's just someplace you go down to. So it really, at least to me, it really sounds more like it's just another way of saying the grave. It's not an afterlife type place.
Mm.
Okay. And
But
then
if
the
if
Bible,
he if he was in the pit, then there wasn't a grave.
oh, you mean the pit that they threw
Yeah.
Joseph into?
He disappeared out. I mean, they sold him to this caravan.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Reuben's idea was that, they could leave him in the pit. And later, when all his brothers went home, he could sneak back there, pull Joseph out of the pit
Oh,
and bring
okay.
him home. He thought the pit was just a temporary holding place. But apparently, when Reuben was away, and we have no idea what he, like you said, we have no idea what he was away. doing, Judah tells his brother to pull him out of the pit and sell him to these Ishmaelites to take down to Egypt.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the Bible has a strange theme here. With the end of chapter 37, the story just breaks off. And then we suddenly, with chapter 38, you go to a totally different story. This is the story of Judah and Tamar.
Mm,
And then at the end of that, it picks up the story of Joseph again, now that he's down in Egypt. We read the Torah on what's called a triennial cycle. We read one third of the Parsha, each year. And this one, it looks like was almost designed to be read that way. It breaks up into three equal parts. We've just read the first third, and then it just breaks away, and there's a second middle section, which is the story of Judah and Tamar. Um, and with this, which is really an interesting story. Um, Somebody want to read the first 11 verses of chapter 38, this Judah and Tamar.
Sure. And it happened at this time that Judah went down from his brothers and pitched his tent by an Adullamite named Hira. And Judah saw there the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua. And he took her and came to bed with her. And she conceived and bore a son and called his name Er. And she conceived again and bore a son and called his name Onan. And she bore still another son and called his name Shelah. And he was at Chezib when she bore him. And Judah took a wife for Er, his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. And Er, Judah's firstborn, was evil in the eyes of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. And Judah said to Onan, "Come to bed with your brother's wife, and do your duty as brother-in-law for her, and raise up seed for your brother." And Onan knew that the seed would not be his, and so when he would come to bed with his brother's wife, he would waste his seed on the ground, so to give no seed to his brother. And what he did was evil in the eyes of the Lord, and he put him to death as well. And Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, "Stay a widow in your father's house until Shelah, my son, is grown up." For he thought, lest he too die like his brothers. And Tamar went and stayed at her father's house.
Yeah. This is a strange story in several ways. One is that he marries a Canaanite woman, which they're not supposed to do. When Abraham sends a servant all the way back, to Mesopotamia, to find Rebecca, to make sure Isaac doesn't marry any of the a local Canaanite women. And Jacob, goes to his uncle Laban, to find a wife within the tribe there. And Esau gets criticized because he goes off and marries a couple of Canaanite women. So, this is a major no-no. And yet, for some reason, Judah gets to do it. Although some of the rabbis, I think Rashi's one of them, tries to make an excuse for him. And they say that the word Canaanite can also mean a merchant. It doesn't necessarily mean a Canaanite. And so they're saying the daughter of a merchant, which, to me is kind of a flimsy way of getting around the fact that he married a Canaanite. Yeah. Now, with the first son, we have no idea why the first son died. It just said God was displeased with him. And what you have next is what is called levirate marriage. The levirate word comes from the Latin levere, which means a brother-in-law. And what it means is that, if a man dies, a married man dies before he has any children, if he has brothers, his brother is really obligated to marry the widow, and so to produce a son who will then inherit his father's estate, his father's land. It's another way of keeping land within the family. And so this is what the second son, Onan, is told to do. This is a requirement. And it says that Onan uh, knew that it wasn't him, so he spilled his seed. And it's kind of interesting. What he was probably doing is what's called coitus interruptus, which was an ancient way of birth control. But for some reason, onanism in modern English became a synonym for masturbation, which is not what he was doing. But you read about onanism, it's just a misinterpretation, probably, of this verse. And of course he's killed because by God for not doing his duty. And so presumably he didn't want Tamar to have children. because that would cut down his inheritance. Judah has three sons. If the first son dies without producing any kids, then the inheritance gets split two ways between Onan and Shelah. But if Onan gets Tamar pregnant and the son, takes heir's place, the first brother, then the inheritance gets split three ways. So the usual interpretation is this is just sheer greed. He didn't want any more heirs in the family to Judah's wealth, and this is why he didn't. Um, and then Tamar, by the way, really is a beautiful name. Tamar means a date palm. It's a palm tree. So it's really a beautiful girl's name. Um, but obviously, what Judah's thinking now is this girl is really bad luck. I don't know if I want to give my last son to her or not. And so he tells her that I'm going to give you my third son. Obviously, the obligation now passes to the last brother, to Selah, who apparently is still a child now. But he tells her, I'm going to give you Shelah. And so she goes home, to her father's house to wait for him to grow up. And what he's doing really is what was called betrothal. In those days, marriage consisted of two steps. First, you're betrothed, and then you have the actual marriage ceremony. And this could be a few weeks apart, it could be months apart, or it could even be years apart. I mean, a lot of marriages were arranged, to cement alliances between families. So you might have a 4-year-old girl betrothed to an 8-year-old boy, and the marriage might not occur till 10 or 12 or 15 years later. What we've done in modern Jewish practice is just to combine the two of them into one day. So the signing of the ketubah, before the wedding ceremony, is the betrothal. And then, the modern practice is you sign the ketubah and then you go directly to the wedding ceremony. But here, the biblical times, there were two very separate things. And so here she's really betrothed to Selah. Judah has said, I'm going to give you Selah. So the betrophal's been done, but he's really lying in the sense that he has no intention of actually going through it with the actual wedding. And so the story picks up again with verses 12 through 19. Sue, you want to read that?
A long time afterward, Shul's daughter, the wife of Judah, died. When his period of mourning was over, Judah went up to Timnah to the sheep shearers, together with his friend Hara the Adulamite. And Tamar was told, "Your father-in-law is coming up to Timnah for the sheep shearing." So she took off her widow's garb, covered her face with a veil, wrapped herself up, and sat down at the entrance to Enam, which is on the road to Timnah, for she saw that Shelah was grown up, yet she had not been given to him as a wife. When Judah saw her, he took her for a harlot, for she had covered her face. So he turned aside to her by the road and said, "Here, let me sleep with you," for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. "What will you pay for sleeping with me?" He replied, "I will send you a kid from my flock." She said, "But you must pledge until you have sent it." And he said, "What pledge shall I give you?" She replied, "Your seal and cord and the staff which you carry." So he gave them to her and slept with her, and she conceived by him. Then she went on her way, and she took off her veil, and again put on her widow's garb.
Okay, so basically what you have here, is Tamar, she hears her biological clock ticking, and she sees she's been put on the shelf. She's never going to really get to marry Sel at this rate. So she says she feels she has to have something happen. So she poses as a prostitute and lures him in. And here, you're being asked to believe that he doesn't recognize his own daughter-in-law, which is really hard to swallow, even with the mask and everything. And at the point you feel the mask must have come off, when they got together. He's been to two of her weddings. How can he possibly not recognize that this is his daughter-in-law? When you think about it, the other person who uses a lot of this is Shakespeare. When you read Shakespeare's plays, a lot of the plots you have brothers who don't recognize sisters, parents who don't recognize children, husbands who don't recognize wives because they're in some kind of disguise. And and so it's sort of, you sort of uh, put your reason to one side and just sort of go along with it. You suspend your disbelief, as a phrase people use. Um, but then, she tells him, she doesn't take plastic, so he's got to either come up with cash or some kind of surety for this thing. And Judah, who apparently has never heard about identity theft, gives him his signet, his cord, and his staff. And what the signet was, it was really a hollow cylinder. It was usually made of wood or of metal. And on the outside of it were patterns that were engraved. It was like a signet ring. You could take the cylinder and press it, roll it over a wet clay tablet, and then press your seal on it. Or you could dip it in ink and roll it across a piece of parchment, and make your sign that way. And the cord, simply since it was a hollow cylinder, you could put a cord through it and wear it around your neck, something you could carry with you. And then, of course, the other sign is his staff, as which he had as the leader of a tribe. Every tribe had its own staff that the leader of a tribe carried. And in fact, in Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, the word for staff and for tribe are the same. It's mateh, which means staff and also means tribe. So this was a really big deal. He's giving away his distinguishing mark, to a woman he's never seen before and may never see again, which is kind of foolish, really, to say the very least. Um, but it's necessary for him to do that in order for the story to end the way that it does. Um, and of course, the ending to the story is 20 through 30. Someone wants to read that.
Sure. And Judas sent the kid by the hand of his friend the Adulamite to take back the pledge from the woman's hand, and he did not find her. And he asked the men of the place, saying, "Where is the cult harlot, the one at Enaim by the road?" And they said, "There has been no cult harlot here." And he returned to Judah and said, "I could not find her." And the men of the place said as well, "There has been no cult harlot here." And Judah said, "Let her take them, lest we be a laughing stock. Look, I sent this kid, and you could not find her." And it happened about 3 months later that Judah was told, saying, "Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has played the whore, and what's more, she's conceived by her whoring." And Judah said, "Take her out to be burned." Out she was taken, when she sent to her father-in-law, saying, "By the man to whom these belong, I have conceived." And she said, "Recognize, pray, whose are this seal and cord and this staff?" And Judah recognized them, and he said, "She is more in the right than I, for have I not failed to give her to Shelah my son?" And he knew her again no more. And it happened at the time she gave birth that, look, there were twins in her womb. And it happened as she gave birth that one put out his hand, and the midwife took it and bound a scarlet thread on his hand, to say, "This one came out first." And as he was drawing back his hand, look, out came his brother. And she said, "What a breach you have made for yourself." And she called his name Perez. And afterward out came his brother, on whose hand was the scarlet thread, and she called his name Zerah.
So, so basically, as soon as her pregnancy begins to show, she's is told to Judah, and uh, and then Judah says, "Let her be burned." Actually, burning was not the penalty for adultery then. It was stoning, and so the rabbinic commentary is that she would be stoned, and then the body would be burned, kind of an additional kind of humiliation. And then, then of course she produces the signet ring and the staff that, the Judah has left with her, and he recognizes it. Um, so, but the rabbinic commentary in the Talmud is kind of interesting in that, first of all, Judah didn't have to acknowledge, this. He could have said, "Yeah, I've never seen these before," and get out of the whole thing by letting her be executed. But but he doesn't. And he says that she was the one who was more right than I. And it's also said that she comes to Judah privately. This is not in a public setting that she does this. And the idea is she doesn't want to embarrass him. She does this privately, but she doesn't want this to get known, that what really happened. And so the teaching that the rabbis and the Talmud say is that a man should be willing to jump into a burning furnace rather than humiliate someone else publicly. And that she was willing to be stoned and then burned rather than humiliate Judah publicly. And fortunately, he decides to do the right thing, and acknowledges that it's his. And the thing that always puzzled me, and I can't find any commentary, it says after this, he had nothing else to do with her. You think he'd want to marry her. I mean, this is a really smart woman. It's really got great qualities. You think he'd want her as a wife. And I've never really understood why Judah didn't go ahead and marry her at that point. Except actually, I guess the objection would be that Selah, is still alive. And he's still, I guess he has to give her to Selah because she's betrothed to him, despite the fact that she's born these twins to Judah. And it's interesting that Perez, the firstborn here, is the one who carries on the line. Perez turns out to be the distant ancestor of Boaz, who's the ancestor of Jesse, who's the father of David. And so the whole line of Judah down to the royal family goes through Perez. And we don't know really whether Tamar then married Selah or Shelah and had children by him. The story just breaks off there, so we really don't know that one way or the other. But the line of inheritance really goes by the children that she has by Judah, and he should have married her, but it may not have been possible, because the betrothal really was almost equivalent. It's an unbreakable contract, really. But then you get to the third part, they break off again at the end of the story, and then they pick up with Joseph again when he comes down into Egypt. So, um, and so chapter 39 picks up again with the story of Joseph, and you guys have been doing all the work, so I'll read a little bit now. The first 6 verses really set the stage for it. It starts off, Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, brought him out of the hand of the Ishmaelites that had brought him down there. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a successful man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found favor in his sight, and he ministered to him. And he appointed him overseer over his house, and put all that he had into his hand. And it came to pass from the time that he appointed him overseer over the house, and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had, in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand. And having him, he knew not anything save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a beautiful form and fair to look on. So this was, the beginning of Joseph's real career, his success in Egypt. It's interesting that where he says that he gave Joseph command of everything in the house. He just left everything to him and didn't bother knowing about it, except for his food that he ate. And so, and most of the commentaries are that apparently the Egyptians had their own food laws, and they had their own kosher system. There were foods they could eat and foods they didn't. And apparently they were not allowed to eat with strangers. And actually, it comes up again later on, when the brothers are coming down to Egypt because of the famine to buy grain, and Joseph is playing this cat and mouse game with them. When he eats together with his brothers, the Egyptians are sent out because they can't eat together with these Jews that have come down from Canaan. So we so apparently the Egyptians have some kind of dietary laws that are never really spelled out, so that Joseph was not allowed to meddle with the diet. but everything else really was left in his hands. The other significant thing is this last part of verse 6, where it says Joseph was a beautiful form and fair to look upon. Yeah, the Hebrew phrase is Yafei Toar, the Yafei Mareh, and that phrase is used only one other time in the Bible. Can anybody guess where it would be? There's
David?
only one other character in the Bible where those exact words are used for.
Well, I would guess David, but that's probably not right.
No, no, good guess, but it isn't. It's Rachel. When Jacob first falls in love with Rachel, that's exactly how she's described. Fair of form and fair to look upon, which actually I think gives you a major clue for one of the reasons why Jacob loves him so much. He looks like his mother. He looks at Joseph, and it reminds Jacob of Rachel. He really looks like his mother. And then it picks up again. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, lie with me. But he refused and said unto his master's wife, behold, my master, having me, knows not what is in the house, and he's put all that he has into my hand. And none is greater in this house than I, but neither have I kept back anything from me but thee, for thou art his wife. And how can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And it came to pass that she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her, to lie with her or to be with her. And it came to pass on a certain day when he went into the house to do his work, and there were none of the men of the house there within. And then she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled, and got him outside. And it came to pass when she saw that he had left his garment in his hand and was fled, that she called unto the men of the house and spoke to them, saying, see, he has brought a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came into me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. It kind of reminds you, wasn't there somebody who said that all these immigrants coming into America were rapists? And this is really the same thing. When Trump said that all these Mexicans are rapists, coming across that we're bringing into this country, and here she's basically saying the same thing. He brought this Hebrew immigrant in here, and look what happened. He tried to rape me. Um, and, and it came to pass when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment by me and fled and got him out. And she laid up his garment by her till his master came home. And she spoke unto him according to these words, saying, the Hebrew servant whom thou hast brought into us came in unto me to mock me. And it came to pass to mock me, the word that's used here is tzahak. And tzahak can mean to laugh. It can mean to play. Yitzchak, Yitzhak gets his name from that. He will laugh. But it's used as a euphemism for sex. And this is how tzahak is being used here. And it came to pass when I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment by me and fled out. And it came to pass when his master heard the words of his wife, which he spoke unto him, saying, after this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into prison, the place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in prison. Now, this is kind of interesting because this is supposedly a slave who's trying to rape his master's wife, and in any culture, the penalty of that would be death, and yet he's not killed; he's put in prison, and it says that his wrath was kindled, but he doesn't say against who. You assume it's against Joseph, but it's not really clear. He may be angry with his wife, because Joseph is really a very valuable servant. It says, but his master knows that God's with him. Everything is prospering under Joseph's hand. And it may very well be that he may have suspected his wife of cheating on him before, with other people. And so rather than having Joseph killed, which would be the penalty in any kind of slave owning culture, he puts them in prison, which suggests to me that it really is pretty ambivalent about this. He's not really sure whether his wife is lying or not, but he can't publicly say you're lying, in front of the whole household. And so he sort of essentially spares Joseph's life, by putting him into prison. Okay. And then the story, picks up with verse 21, with Joseph in prison. Um, Someone want to pick up with and read from verse 21.
Sure. And he was there in the prison house, and God was with Joseph and extended kindness to him and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison house warden. And the prison house warden placed in Joseph's hands all the prisoners who were in the prison house and all that they were to do there. It was he who did it. The prison house warden had to see to nothing that was in his hands, as the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made succeed. And it happened after these things that the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and his baker gave offense to their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was furious with his two courtiers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and he put them under guard in the house of the high chamberlain, the prison house, the place where Joseph was held. And the high chamberlain assigned Joseph to them, and he ministered to them, and they stayed a good while under guard. And the two of them dreamed a dream, each his own dream, on a single night, each a dream with its own solution. The cupbearer and the baker to the king of Egypt, who were held in the prison house. And Joseph came to them in the morning and saw them, and look, they were frowning. And he asked Pharaoh's courtiers who were with him under guard in his lord's house, saying, Why are your faces downcast today? And they said to him, We dreamed a dream, and there is no one to solve it. And Joseph said to them, Are not solutions from God? Pray, recount them to me. And the chief cupbearer recounted his dream to Joseph and said to him, In my dream, and look, a vine was before me, and on the vine were 3 tendrils, and as it was budding, its blossoms shut up, its clusters ripened to grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and crushed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I placed the cup in Pharaoh's palm. And Joseph said, This is its solution. The 3 tendrils are 3 days. 3 days hence, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your place. And you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But if you remember I was with you once, it goes well for you. Do me the kindness, pray, to mention me to Pharaoh and bring me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen from the land of the Hebrews, and here too I have done nothing that I should have been put in this pit. And the chief baker saw that he had solved well. And he said to Joseph, I too in my dream, and look, there were 3 open work baskets on my head, and in the topmost were all sorts of food for Pharaoh. Baker's ware and birds were eating from the basket over my head. And Joseph answered and said, This is its solution. The 3 baskets are 3 days. 3 days hence, Pharaoh will lift up your head from upon you and impale you on a pole, and the birds will eat your flesh from upon you. And it happened on the 3rd day, Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast for all his servants. And he lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker in the midst of his servants. And he restored the chief cupbearer to his cupbearing. And he put the cup in Pharaoh's hand, and the chief baker he impaled, just as Joseph had solved it for them. But the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph. No, he forgot him.
It's interesting. The dreams are really sort of the basic a theme of the whole Joseph story. The whole thing starts with these 2 dreams that Joseph has, about the sheaves and about the sun and moon and stars that get him in trouble in the first place. And then it's the interpretation of these dreams. Later on, the cupbearer does remember Joseph, and he gets out of prison. And then he rises to the highest level by interpreting 2 of Pharaoh's dreams. And so what you really have are 3 pairs of dreams that are sort of the basic theme of the entire story. It's also kind of some clever writing here, where he says Pharaoh will lift up your head, um, which in the Bible is really an idiom, for recognizing someone, for honoring them, for appreciating them. In the priestly blessing, we say, "May God lift up His face to you, and be gracious unto you." But then he tells the other guy, your head will be lifted up too, but not the same way. Pharaoh actually cuts this guy's head off and impales it, but they both had their heads lifted up, but just in two totally opposite ways. Okay, anybody have any questions about any comments about what we covered tonight? Okay, well, next week again, the parsha for next week is we pick up again. It's called Mikate, starting with chapter 41. It's going to run through. It's a long story. It runs chapters 41 through 44, which will be the parsha for the succeeding week. Going on with the story of Joseph.
I won't
Okay, so,
I won't be available that night, so will we be meeting New Year's Eve as well?
is New Year's Eve a Tuesday?
Yeah, I just now noticed that.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't think about it. I guess not. Yeah. So uh yeah. So no,
So
we
you,
we won't meet New Year's Eve.
okay,
We could, but Irene would never speak to me again if I didn't take her out New Year's
okay,
Eve. So we're off then.
Okay.
So see you guys next week.
okay.
All
So
right.
I won't be with you next week, but you will let me know what we're reading the week after New Year's.
The week
Which,
after New Year's, right?
yeah,
Yes.
yes,
Okay.
okay,
All right.
terrific.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay.
Thank you, Fred.
Bye.